The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran, and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur or investor, where you experience the highest of highs, such as when you are being chosen to be chief scientist and chair of two meaningful technology and science committees, and the lowest of lows when you are told you have only a few months to live. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self-manage ourselves, keep up our energy and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything, well, it's not easy. In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspects accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. Today, I have the honor to be speaking with Dr. Orna Berry, a significant figure in the Israeli high-tech ecosystem. So welcome, Orna. I'm very happy to have you here with me.
Very nice to be here, Gali.
Orna, you were the first and only woman to serve as chief scientist and head of the industrial R&D operation of the Israeli Ministry of Industry, Trade and Labor. You were also vice president of Dell EMC and general manager of Israel Center of Excellence, and an entrepreneur and business figure in Israeli companies like PrimeSense, Aladdin, Alvarion, and venture partner at Gemini. Nowadays, you are the director of technology at Google Cloud CTO's office. In 2005, the American technology magazine Red Herring ranked you as one of the 25 most influential and important women in the world of technology. And you're also well known for your extensive volunteer work in promoting diversity and employment quality. So, as I said, it's a real pleasure and honor to have you here with me. And I'm sure we're going to share so many insights and little stories from your journey. So maybe take us to the beginning where everything began in your family. How was it to being raised by the special parents that you had? What did you take from being in this family and how it designed your and shaped your way of life later on?
Thank you very much, and I'm really happy to be here. So, I was born in December 1949, newly born Israel. My father served in the Israeli Air Force and was one of the first fighter pilots, actually the first course that completed its education here in Israel. And I grew with the technology and determination around me because my father was also highly technological. First book outside MIT on inertial and electronic navigation was written by him for the Israeli Air Force. And it went on. Technology was definitely something that I was very curious about it. Yet, my father tried very hard to get my brothers to be engineers and tried very hard to have me well-behaved, which turned out to be impossible. And
how many brothers were you?
I have two brothers, wonderful brothers, and luckily my brothers and I understand each other very well, and I got plenty support from them to be one of them rather than a woman. Not that I'm not a woman. I have three children, and I'll get to gender identification in
I'm sure we'll speak about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I have a particular story that was doubting my gender.
So technology was in the house?
Technology was in the house. My brothers who were brought to technology, one of them is a professor of economics and the other one is a lawyer, and I'm the engineer. This is a lot of fun, and we laugh at it a lot, and we complement each other's understanding, and we usually have Saturday meetings where I learn a lot about economy, and I also learn about rationalization, and so it goes. So fast forward, I served in the Air Force. I was in flying school, not as a pilot. I was responsible for the ground program. There was a framework, but this was the war of attrition, and everything was changing because flying the same pilots who were training in school at flying school were also in their squadrons to fly. So the timing was changing all the time. This was very interesting because also I found myself sometimes having to fill in myself and having to study stuff that in various professions, and I enjoyed it tremendously. Went to study mathematics after completing a third year in the army, translating checklists and tech books for American airplanes, because beforehand there were French airplanes, and then
everything was in French.
No, everything was in Hebrew,
Okay.
but translated from France and from French. But this was the time that Israel has already signed before with the United States. They lifted their embargo and they started selling planes. There were the Skyhawks, there were the Phantoms. So basically, I spent a year translating books. So I was translating them and then working with Israeli staff on putting it in Israeli culture, because not every expression in the States, or not every long step in the States that is detailed is suitable for the patients of the Israelis. And also, we still need to be complete. You can't round the edges. So that was that. And then I went to study. Eventually, I wanted to touch computers, but it was still with punched cards. So I waited until there were terminals to go on and do a PhD. After completing the PhD, which was in distributed systems, I went into networking. This was a fascinating period, mid 80s well into the 90s. Networking was evolving from being something that was defense-oriented through the DARPANET, ARPANET to the commercial world, and that was fascinating. And then in 1993, a few friends and I, we started a company called Orna Data Communications up in Carmiel. And this is very significant because the significance is not the technology. The significance is doing business in the periphery of Israel. And I was among the first entrepreneurs who raised funding for a tech company out of the newly formed venture capital industry in Israel. This company started operating...
This year's back in 1993, when you're talking about raising funds. So do you remember the numbers approximately, like for the seed round, the A round, comparing to what happens today?
Seed round was $500,000. Then there was another $2 million. Then there was a bridge funding that summed up to about $4.5 million. And the company was sold for $32 million in September of '95. But the issue, the key issue that was important was setting foot in the periphery in Carmiel, and the lovely opportunity to employ not only Jews. We had outstanding Arabic employees. The first of them was Jamil Mazawi. This was, for me, it was talent rather than any discriminatory component that played. And I'm still meeting some of the people from the company then as if it was yesterday. Some people we have, we can immediately cover any time gap in order to continue from there.
So that actually was the first startup, the first company that you built after your education, after the army, as a grown woman and entrepreneur.
Yeah, I skipped the fact that I worked in the States for the Rand Corporation, for a System Development Corporation that was acquired by Burroughs and merged with Sperry to become Unisys. I skipped the fact that I worked for IBM Research in Israel, that I worked for Fibronics, built bridges, and also served as the chief scientist for the company. But I went straight to Ornet because that was much more eventful for two reasons. First of all, the emergence of the venture capital industry in Israel. Secondly, the partnership, which is something very strong in all my way. The fact that I partner with people. I don't do things myself. I do things for a team to succeed, and I take a part in the group.
You know, it's talked a lot about how the way that we are being raised and part of our origin family with our siblings. And you mentioned it earlier, how you're doing things together, and one is a lawyer, and one is you are the engineer, and the other one is the economics, and you shared the knowledge and did things together. And then again, you talk about it again in the partnerships that you wanted to create with other people. But before we go ahead, did the young Orna, who was raised in this family with those parents and those values, looked ahead to the future, and did you have this vision about yourself where you're going to be, or it's just like you went to the life, you started to learn, you were also curious with everything that you did? Who was the young Orna?
Until I had cancer, I always say that if I'll die from anything, I'll die from curiosity. So I think that I demonstrate a lack of responsibility of trying new stuff, mostly because of curiosity. And consequently, I could not envision the technology market. I could not envision what the choice of not going to academia but going to the industry would lead to. By all means, I could not imagine that as an entrepreneur, I will point out at my job in the government as a director general of a technology arm in the government. I would never think that this would be a highlight in my career. So I know, in retrospect, I know to tell you that I like technology to impact society, and consequently, when I worked in the government, I had an impact on a market that was evolving and became critical for the Israeli economy, for Israeli defense, for Israeli education, all of it. So it is so fulfilling to see that you're doing something that has, augmenting the pie in every respect, in the national pie, in every respect that you touch. And that was a good reason to work from 5 o'clock in the morning to 11 p.m. at night.
So maybe you just envision the curious Orna
That's right.
for
That's right. Curious.
your whole life, being curious.
Curious and experimental.
Yeah. So back to Ornat, and then what happens?
So Ornat was established, and this was January 1993, and was sold to Siemens in September of '95. When we started, there were about 60 boutiques of technologies that were looking at high performance networking through switching or other media that was sufficiently fast to give higher performance to the connected workstations or computers. So by the time that we finished the development of the product, there were about 3 companies that really merged all the companies into them, acquired them. And if we would have continued to be independent, I can say that the budget of another company just for marketing was 5 times larger than our total accumulated investment. You cannot really compete in that. And also, systems became important rather than technology items. So in general, you know, if we talk about the cloud today, we look at the fact that we have moved completely from technology infrastructure to the use, to the data and to the modeling and to the compute capabilities that we want to achieve. We don't want to deal with items of the infrastructure. This doesn't exclude the development of new components and, you know, quantum technologies or special components for inference and for learning or special services and such. But at the end of the day, from me, the patient in this case, you're interested in understanding the ecosystem. In my case, of me as a patient and of the disease that I have in general, and that is not a question of a single component. It's a question of utilization of information and processing the information in the broader sense.
And it's beautiful to describe it that way, and it connects to the conversation that we had prior to record this podcast, which connects the dots between your journey and what you're going through nowadays, and the positions that you're choosing to take. And we'll get to it in short. So you sold the company to Siemens. Then what happened?
So then I was asked to become the chief scientist. I didn't submit myself to that position because I didn't think about myself as an entrepreneur going to work for the government.
So stop for a second. You're saying I was asked to be chief scientist. So take us back to this moment. It's like somewhere in the end of the 90s, right? And it's 96. 96. And where does it catch you? How do you feel that way? What do you think at the moment that someone wants to give you this position? Where does it take you in your curious Orna journey through your life?
It's very interesting, and I was very surprised by this request, and because I didn't see myself as a person in a large system. I saw myself as an entrepreneur and having marginal impact. I didn't realize how significant a marginal impact on the Israeli market I can have in that position. And I said twice no. And finally, my candidacy was published in papers because somebody said that I'm a leading contender. And Minister Sharansky called me to apologize that it leaked. And I told him that I don't, that I withstand pressure and I don't care. And then my friend and predecessor, Dr. Shuki Gleitman, played a different game on me, and he said...
Like a good cap, bad cap they gave you.
No,
to.
But Sharansky apologized for infringing privacy or private conversations. Shuki came and played on something that he did very well, on Zionism, on the contribution that this can have to Israel, and the fact that he was convinced that I'm the right person. And since I just...
And it worked.
First of all, it worked. I told him, this is exactly at the time that I got divorced from a second marriage that that ended with violence, and I told him that he needs to talk to my children, because during the startup they didn't see me much, and it was clear to me that this is going to be a significant position. We were living in Haifa at this time. My main office was in Jerusalem. One day a week I was in Tel Aviv. So I told him he has to talk to my kids.
To get their approval.
Yes.
And what did they say?
So my center daughter came with the... she was 18 or 17 and a half. She said, in this household, everybody does what they're good at, and that
she's smart.
She's brilliant, by the way. My children are the three of them are amazing.
I can't imagine.
Well, it's beyond what you can imagine. Well beyond me. I learned from them a lot, and truly, and she basically carved the way, because she figured that this will be good in terms of the state that we were in transitioning from not having a father at home, and indeed this was she was right, because psychologically, in retrospect, when you think about it, when you're in such a position, you're in a position that you don't, other than talking to the Ministry of Finance about the budget, in general, this is a giving position. So this was really good, and I spent there almost 4 years.
How did you manage it with your children?
So
doing this transition and everything that happens at home, and being in this position with so much responsibility and need to deliver, and you have, it's on your shoulders because you're the first and only woman that does it. So how did you cope with it?
Look, when my former husband was away for part of the Gulf War, when my youngest daughter wasn't even a year old, and her sister, the one who was smart enough to tell me that if I'm asking permission from the children, it means that I'm interested, she was basically babysitting her, because the babysitter was terrified from the missiles, and she was the one who stayed, and I was called to work because I was in a needed position. So and that was when I worked for Fibronics. So I think that first of all you juggle. But the only period of time that I had a live-in person, an Israeli, was the period that I was the chief scientist. And originally I told her 3 years, and then I extended it, and she stayed until this was finished. And she was she herself had a good education in high school. She had 5 units of math. During her time with me, she practiced in accounting, and of course, when my youngest daughter was a little bit older, she could work half-time in an external body to practice her accounting. So all in all, this was, we know how to get organized and to minimize the needs for the functions that are more technical or at home. And eventually, we are in it together. This is a partnership, and I'm not joking when I'm saying it's a partnership, because I really feel that enablement, whether it is for one person to their partner, or for one person to the children, or from the children to the parents, it's an enablement game. So it's not so difficult to define the red lines. Like, if any of my children needed hospitalization, the world could stop and I'm there. If something is easy and can be administered by somebody else, it will be administered by somebody else.
So, a huge change in your personal life, and this position, which is one of a kind till these days, and you're doing it for 4 years. Take us to a peak moment during this position, if you can recall. I'm sure there were many. Something that really was meaningful and with lots of impact in this position.
Funny enough, on one birthday, before my central daughter Yael went to the army, I decided to take a day off.
Wow.
And I get a call from then the CEO of Sheba, Zeev Rothstein, and he asks me to come urgently to Sheba. So I ask what's the issue, and he and Professor Aryeh Orenstein decided that they wanted to establish Advanced Technology Center. They had a newly installed MRT, MRI for real time at the hospital, the kind of 2 large bagels that the doctors stand within, and they see the patient on the operating table, and they see the imaging of the body, so they can touch tissues that are flexible. And they decided that they wanted to make to create collaborations around it and make more out of it. And it was urgent in my birthday, in my 1 day off. So I said, okay, so I'm bringing Yael because I don't understand anything in biology. She studied in high school biology, and a colleague of mine who was responsible for the more strategic programs, Ilan Peled, and we went to the hospital. And we went to the hospital, and this ended up in forming 2 such initiatives, one in Rambam and the other one in Sheba. The one in Sheba exists until today, and created a very interesting collaborations, initially on the Magnet program, which was collaboration between academia and industry programs, and eventually it also got funded by the European Union. It's a very interesting process that you serve after certain qualification, regulatory qualifications, as a beta site, and you allow the Israeli industry to have a place to try before it goes abroad.
So you optimized your day off for the birthday, and you made these huge projects that are still working.
I facilitated.
You facilitated, right.
They did it.
It's all about partnerships.
Yes, yes. So Ilan and I facilitated. Yael told me what made sense to her, and as I said already, she's very smart, and this is it. And in some respect, I always had appreciation for medicine. 40 years ago, I wanted to attempt biomathematics, but because computers were too weak in terms of the size of the data and the processing power, I found that the models are too theoretical and we cannot solve real disease problems, which is not the case today. Today we're talking about involvement of data and modeling in conventional medicine, not only research.
Yeah. And, being in this position, how did you manage it mentally from the mental aspects to be with so much responsibility and expectations? It's not the innovation ecosystem and the venture capital that we have nowadays. It's just the beginning of the high-tech industry. You're a woman in this position. There's a lot of stress from one hand, and the other hand, you have to, as you just described, to manage everything that happens at home. What helped you to keep Orna in the right place? And on the one hand, and to actually keep on operating and functioning in the best possible way and love what you do. Continue with your curiosity and passion to what you do.
First of all, curiosity was well satisfied because I was responsible for research and development, not only in the areas that I came from. It was not only networking, data communication, or computer science. It was also bioinformatics. It was also physics, electronics. It was really a multitude of domains, as I mentioned, medicine and health and imaging, variety of stuff. So, from curiosity perspective, this was a candy store. From decency, I think we go back to my parents. I think they were very decent people. I don't think that you can ever say that they used a position for their own benefit. They saw the national benefit in what they did, and were very committed to that in periods that were harsher than we experienced. So it was a blessing, with particularly the incubators program that was run by Irina Prideaux and was covering from Kiryat Shmona to the Golan Heights, all the way down to Sde Boker. Then I think that also my affinity for equal opportunity and the whole topic of the periphery was alive and well, and this was great. And also when later on Ran Cohen came after Sharansky, and he was very sensitive, very honest. No political requests in the office. He was a pleasure to work with, but we paid special attention to also innovation in the Arab community, and this was a good start. After that, there were many organizations that are more volunteer organizations, but also commercial organizations, and you find companies like Microsoft who have a site in Nazareth, for example. So I think that we can point at meaningful societal contributions that come with the power of combining know-how and funding wherever the know-how rests.
And that was your goal along the way also, all the time, to combine the different parts of the population and to increase the what we nowadays talk about a lot on diversity and inclusion. So nowadays it has a name and big trends, etc. And back then it was less spoken about, but you did it. You actually worked in order to promote this agenda.
Yeah, and there were like one of the most interesting religious colleges, Lev, that gave phenomenal education to people, to religious people, had also an incubator there. So really this was a diverse opportunity to include everybody, provided that they had knowledge and determination to succeed in a particular entrepreneurship or project.
So chief scientist and head of industrial R&D, and then what happens?
And then I left and I joined Gemini, my former investors, for an interim that lasted 10 years. And companies like Riverhead Networks, this is, by the way, Yuda Fek, whom I'm going to see after our conversation to speak about network and cloud security. So they were distributed denial of service right after the bubble burst. Then Yuda and I are friends from the time that we met in Los Angeles when he was doing his PhD and I was actually both. We did masters and PhD, and then another company that was very interesting but fell in a poor time from funding perspective was in fiber optics. And wave division multiplexing, which related to one of the consortia that we had in the Magnet under the chief office of the chief scientist. Another company that probably was the highlight was PrimeSense. PrimeSense really changed the modality of human interface with the Kinect and the Xbox, and eventually was acquired by Apple. And this was, it always is about outstanding people with great ideas, helping to focus on markets and not only on a successful technology. It's very, very important that the leaders they understand the technology, but they aim at the business. And that is a fundamental issue that we see and actually changed a lot in the Israeli market, because today we find many more CEOs who understand the business and hold in their teams some capable technologists.
So being a venture partner, being an investor those years, it wasn't common. First of all, it was the beginning of this industry in Israel. Plus,
it already
began.
It's already the third cycle of the funds. I had opportunities to actually close the first cycle when I was in the government, and when the government received back the initial funding and plus the very high interest that closed the stage that the government and the Yozma Fund was part of the venture capital scenery. And from stage 2 of the funds, the funds were private funds. And I came out from the office of the chief scientist when it was the third phase of funds.
So how did you feel back then? Although you see yourself, and we also defined it in the beginning, as a successful human being and successful leader, But having said that, as a woman in this position, which wasn't that common back then, leading this change and helping companies evolve and create the right business models and take them globally, how did you feel there?
There are some times that you can choose and sometimes that you cannot choose. So I can tell you that when I was chief scientist, a person came into my office. Actually, I stood out of my office, in front of my office, there were two secretaries. I stood out, and the guy comes and asks, "Where is the office of the chief scientist?" So I pointed out at the door, and he went in there. And after that, we had a meeting, and of course, he was a little bit intimidated by the virtue of the fact that he didn't know that the chief scientist is
you.
me. On the other hand, when I already worked in Gemini, I decided that I only work with people who want to work with me. I'm not going to fight anybody. And indeed, there are people who think that, that women are not suitable. Somehow, I didn't encounter them too much. And the people who came, I know that Prime Sense interviewed many people to be their chair. It was a very unique team, totally disobedient, very bright. And they came to me and they said that they decided that they want me to be their chair. Why? Maybe one day I'll ask them. But no, we're still friends. And then afterwards, when we had developed the model for semiconductors, then I figured that we need a CEO who comes from semiconductors, and I came to an agreement, particularly with the key entrepreneur of Yad Meisels, that he remains president and will bring Ginon Bracha as a CEO. And the three of us are still friends. So it means that I don't play a woman. I only team up with people who are willing to listen. I had a 72nd birthday a week ago. And
congratulations.
Thank you, and I spent the weekend with my, I have 3 children. One of them is in Bonn, and she couldn't come because of the closed skies. But my 2 other children, Yael and Amit, they and their families, we were up in the Galilee. So I have 4 grandchildren, and my son, during dinner for the birthday, told me that he actually liked, actually it was drinks after. So he said he actually liked the fact that I never tried to please anybody. And that was something that I didn't realize. But after he said it, I thought about it. And probably there are many people who don't like me because I didn't try to act very pleasing. It's not that I'm acting displeasing, but
You're just
I'm
being
straight.
very, very connected to yourself.
No, I don't know if I'm connected to myself. This is another question I have to ask. But the key issue is that when I talk to people, I talk to the person and about the issue. This morning, I had a conversation with a friend who is the chair of the Academy of Sciences. And I had a conversation because one of their committees has requirements for infrastructure that they do not normally have. So because of the importance of the committee, I decided that the large companies in Israel will group together to provide some assistance. It's still not secured, but that's the idea that I have. And we're working on that. And I explained that I think that we need to help this committee, but in the future, they will need more infrastructure, because today the way committees are run, they often buy data and learn from experience of others. So you need to integrate. And we had this conversation. Now we're friends. He's a known scientist, David Rael. I respect him tremendously, but this is a topic that I master, because the fact of the matter that I've done a lot of such integration work for the State of Israel. So I can voice an opinion, and I don't need to be a pleaser. I need to explain what I think. So I don't see the point of pleasing. I see the point of being side by side with people who together can do more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's back to partnerships. So I think that equality means that whether people are working for you, or whether you enable people to do things, it's not one above and one down. And the need to be above or to feel down is very subjective, because I think you get most if you work shoulder to shoulder. And I feel that if we look at every problem that comes about as an important problem, and first we understand the importance of the problem, and then we understand who knows how to bring the problem to solution. If we act as a society on that, rather than as a vested interest on that, the vested interest can be most successful, the society can be most successful, the scientists can be most successful, the money invested will be fruitful. So all of it is the same for me, and that probably didn't change from when I was 3 years old, and I told the woman who I came with my father, who was in an Air Force uniform, and she was hitting her son, and told the kid that here comes a policeman. So I pulled my dad, and I stopped by her, and I told her, first of all, he's not a policeman, he's from the Air Force, and he's my father. Secondly, he didn't come to take your child. And thirdly, it's not proper that a big person is hitting a small one. So that was when I was 3 years old.
So it's a beautiful way how everything is connected, that if you look at the big picture, and if you look about on the relationships, and how each one nurtures the other. And if I take you back like 30 minutes back to when you spoke about your family and children, and you called it the enablement game, right? That we have to enable each other to rise and to be the way he or she sees it, and to make everyone in their best. And in the same way also for companies, if we support and if we work, as you said, shoulder to shoulder. So it's really beautiful to see that your son, who's younger than you, he reflected you on your 72nd birthday, that you never tried to please, because this thing that goes through your life, like since you were 3 years old and up till now, it's some kind of a value, it's part of your DNA, the way that you behave, the way that you lead, from something which is very authentic and very real and very true to the way that you see things. And it does good. It does good to society, it does good to the family, it does good to the companies that you led, and it all comes from the very same place.
Yeah. And also, like I mentioned, Yehuda Afek and Riverhead Networks, he came to me in a period that nobody was investing, because this was after the bubble burst. And now that I need to do a deeper analysis of security, unrelated to a particular cloud, but the whole idea of networking and cloud security is something that I'll be asking him because he's the expert. So I don't feel bad calling him and asking him for assistance.
So, Gemini, 10 years, and then what happens?
Then I was in Australia in a Forbes Asian CEO conference, and I got a call from a person who became a dear friend, Joel Schwartz, who was a senior vice president at EMC, who was recommended to talk to me by a woman who is also a friend, and he asked me whether I'd be interested in leading EMC Center of Excellence in Israel. This was a number of acquisitions that EMC held, and they wanted to put them together. This was interesting because if now I'm 72, I was over 60 then. And again, when we talk about my brothers, I made a change at the age of 61, and one day, this is the day I signed in EMC. My brother Danny did the same. At 61, he left his position as deputy CEO at Leumi, and formed with Viola a Viola fintech fund. And my brother Rami is faster than us, and he left his legal partnership to become the legal advisor and business development for agriculture Israeli firm at the age of 59.
So 60 is the time when everything happens. All the good stuff happens.
No, I'm saying he's much faster than we are, because we were 61 and
a whole
he's 59.
two full years.
And then I joined Google 2.5 months ago. So yes, we demonstrate that no matter what, your experience plus your knowledge can be useful.
So that happens in the professional life, and you keep on evolving and contributing and taking your knowledge from one industry to another, from one vertical to another, from the government to the private market, from the venture capital to startups, to companies, to lead companies, to work with diverse kind of founders.
And establish facilities in the periphery, and being mostly proud out of it, and believing in equal opportunity through education, and many other things that I think are dynamics and are led a lot by the civil society, and have an impact at the end.
So much doing, so much impact. And what are you dealing with personally in your private life in the recent years, in parallel?
I have, basically, I was operated on January 19th, 2016, after diagnosis that this is going to be a benign tumor to be removed. The pathology thought differently, that it found carcinosarcoma, which is a very bad cancer in the uterus, and serous carcinoma in my 2 ovaries, which is a death on the wall because of the fact that this is a late finding of a very easy to spread type of cancer. 2 tumors in one ovary, 1 tumor in the other. I got the diagnosis on a Thursday, February 3rd, 2016. And I come out of it and I tell my kids and my brothers and then my staff that I'm going to face very difficult time. I don't know how long it will last, but the following day, I called the United States, my management, and told them what were the findings. And they immediately asked me whether I want to go out on a leave, and I said no. And the reason that I said no was mostly because I was afraid this was when Dell was acquiring EMC. I was very concerned about Beersheba and about the national cert that we were building there, and the site that is managed by Maya Hoffman-Levy, who is a tremendous resource herself. And I stayed until this was clear that people understand what the contribution of the site is, and eventually assimilating it in the right business units. And this was an uphill battle, because there were some people who were trying to flatten the world and see Israel, which is, we know that Israel is an expensive country, but also high throughput, and eliminating, the economy of speed and technical or technological level, and just looking at the cost is not correct. In fact of the matter is that we're still in third place with regard to attractiveness for investments in the world, out of 62 countries. So basically, I called my doctor and I told him that I will follow his regime, but I do want to look at additional recommendations if there are new things to do. Also, since I was after the surgery, I extended the time before taking the first treatment by a week, and went to give a talk in the UK that I promised. And met another woman who survived gynecological cancer. That was very inspiring, and then I came back, and we started talking to multiple doctors who were looking, oncologists and people who were looking at new clinical trials, but the field of gynecology is not very popular. Very few people are actually developing and researching, because first of all, it addresses older women. Mm-hmm. Secondly, unless they have BRCA positive. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the number of women who contract ovarian cancer is about 1/10 of women contracting breast cancer. It's a very small market, and most of the drug developers are stopping very quickly looking at this target market. I think very few companies looked specifically at ovarian cancer. I know of one, but for the sake of fairness, if I don't know of another one, I won't mention the one. And we added two components. One component was a drug called Vastin that we added to the protocol. My HMO didn't want to give it to me because it wasn't in the protocol, and in any case, it was an orphan disease in the combination. The day before we started the chemo, I did a PET-CT, which is the right way to do the detection, not CT and not ultrasound. They don't see the ovaries well. And we found that potentially I have also cancer in the thyroid, which in May we verified. So, this last February, I was operated on, and the right lobe was removed. The left lobe is augmented and is not cancerous, but is also not really functioning. So I need to take a hormone.
Hormones.
Yeah, and but the interesting issue is that once you start exploring so I had to show the HMO that actually the Avastin had an impact through the data, talking about data, and they were convinced, and initially they gave me hell every 3 months. Eventually, I think I hold the world record for the number of intravenous treatments, and I'm talking to you 5 years later, almost 5 years later, and basically, I realized through this process that data, the way it is used, is not really supporting decisions about the patient, and is not really supporting the patient in making their decisions. And I will give an example that my HMO sent me 2 weeks ago, a letter that they stopped supporting my treatments. Now, it is nearly 5 years since the surgery that I paid out of pocket. I didn't, it wasn't supported by the HMO. But it's 5 years. And most of the drugs that I'm receiving, like 95%, are dependent on the outcome of the treatments. And I send, because I send every document back to the HMO, and I figured that they didn't consult my family doctor, no my treating doctor, in order to understand what is my position. They only looked at the administrative data, that it was 5 years since the beginning. And so I realized that the data that I was providing them was not ingested by them. And this means that this calls for a big change, because nowadays, when we are talking about digital medicine and we are talking about putting the patient in the center, the patient is not in the center, neither is medicine. It's the administration that is in the center. So we have some, this is why I have some work to do, no?
Keeps you busy.
Yeah. First
No,
of all,
it's very frustrating that not enough that someone has to deal with everything that he or she has to deal, in this case you, with the surgeries and the drugs and all the treatments that you have to go through. You also have to beat bureaucracy, and it's very complicated and it's unclear, and you are very smart and you also know how to address things, but not everyone are in this position that knows how to manage in these kind of situations.
First of all, I was insulted by getting this letter. It wasn't signed by a person. It was just a form letter. The first paragraph praised the HMO. The second paragraph told me to go look for my friends. The third paragraph told me that if I want to talk to them, I should send forms. And they had all the data. So the first reaction was I was insulted. The second reaction was that I realized what they're doing. It's 5 years since the date that they indicated is the end of the month that is 5 years from the surgery. So I figured it's a time dependent and not a medicine
situation,
medical opinion. And then I asked my doctor, who is head of oncology in Sheba, Jacob Korach, and the correspondence between the hospital and the HMO is formalized. there is no place to voice an opinion. So he wrote a letter that is an opinion, which is, I had 7 letters of opinions when I asked for the Avastin. And initially they declined, and then I came with the data. They asked me, why am I coming and not my doctor? And I said, my doctor wrote twice, and other doctors wrote as well. So the issue is the interpretation of the data and the translation of it in order to put the patient in the center is just not existent in the model in which the computers are formed to use the data. And here is data, and here is model. One model is the patient. One other model is the treatment. One other model is
and they're just not aligned.
The medical, yeah.
They are not speaking together,
no,
those different models.
No, they're not.
And if we reflect it to the startups world, so the whole user experience in this situation is really, really bad. And sending this kind of form letter, which is not personalized and which doesn't see you in the center of it, is also very problematic. We're talking about, life of people, and it's very, very crucial. And I think that nowadays startups that are operating in the digital health or health arenas, they really much understand the need to see the patients, because this is also a crucial part of the recovery.
And also the Ministry of Health. I have to say that the Ministry of Health, together with 8400 and multiple other government offices, are very much looking at putting the patient in the center, at putting better utilization of the data. The question is how you do that. But the need is I think is recognized by the Ministry of Health, by the Ministry of Finance, and eventually it will get to the HMOs. But saying that we're best in treating the patient,
we're not there yet.
We're definitely not there yet. And the other concern, and what I managed to do previously, is that when I succeed in getting something, I make it known at least to the volunteer body that is advising other patients, because the Ministry of Health initially, in its previous generation, didn't want to deal with that. But I think, first of all, the current Ministry of Health is working on it, and certainly the groups that are supporting patients know everything that I have done, because what I've done is not a personalized issue. It is a matter of actually analyzing the situation and putting the best recommendation out of it for me and for others.
Orna will have to hit the pause soon, because you're very busy lady, and you have so many more important things to address today. But if I look at this so far, 72 years and a week, and the whole journey that you made from being a part of a team of 3 brothers, and the engineer one, and a daughter to your parents, your mom who was a nurse, and your father who was a pilot, and then later on growing your own 3 children, and the various positions that you held during your career path, and the glass ceilings that you broke in so many directions. You did so many things, and then yet looking at you, and you're so humble, and you're so scientific in the way that you address things. And exactly like you said, I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm just bringing my truth and my knowledge and my understanding of things. So what would you say to the young Orna, who is now, looking to the future, and she's only curious, she doesn't know yet to envision what will be, or to the young girl from Carmiel, or from Haifa now, or from everywhere else that is looking to her future as a symbol, because you are a symbol of the Israeli tech scene, I think also globally.
Thank you. First of all, there is nothing not to be humble about, because there are lots of things that we haven't done yet, and we should. So about talking to girls in the periphery, I have a granddaughter who lives in Be'er Sheva, and I have several topics with her. She's an activist for women's rights, and particularly against violence against women. And she even organized some demonstrations. And on the other hand, she's a very bright kid with capabilities in technology. And she definitely likes better the human interface than just the number crunching. So I talk to her, I talk with her. My grandson from Be'er Sheva asked me to come and talk to his class. I go reasonably frequently to Yerucham. The robotics class had a young woman from a religious school there heading the competing team. So I'm connected to the grounds. I'm really I mentor women. I take it as a commitment to actually help everyone focus on her capabilities and her desires to play more effectively for herself and for the society. We should make sure that even when we are mentoring, we are not mentoring people to be self-centered. We are mentoring people to be successful as a mission of a society to be more successful.
It's some part of being part of a greater good.
Right.
That
right.
each one will contribute to the greater good.
That's absolutely right.
So I think that with this beautiful message of contributing to the greater good, I really hope that also within this conversation with you now, we contributed to the greater good of the ecosystem and young women and men that want to change the world, and how we should take care of our own health and fight the different things and obstacles that we have in life, and never give up, and have the inner strength to deal with everything that comes with life, and life brings us many challenges. And I really want to say thank you for joining me today. It was I'm always excited before the podcast because I really like my interviewees. But you can even ask Oz, who helped us here. I was really excited because I respect you a lot. And I remember a year ago that I was invited to speak in the UAE about the Israeli mindset. And I did it through Israeli entrepreneurial mindset. And I did it through case studies of women entrepreneurs, and then you were the first one I spoke about. And in my vision, like you, I'm just curious. I don't know where it will lead me, but I remember I read about you, and I spoke about you, and I knew that one day I will talk to you in this kind of situation to get to know you in a better way. So even for me, it's like a closure. So thank you for coming here, and thank you for, I think, from everyone about everything that you did and still doing and will do in the future, and I'm sure it will be much more. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
And thank you very much. You're very empowering.
Thank you. To our lovely listeners, we're going to hit pause until the next episode. That's also something I say to the entrepreneurs in my clinic in between sessions. If you enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you share the podcast with people who you think would derive value from it. Thanks to the amazing studios at Google Campus that allows me to record here all this important content. Feel free to visit my website at galiblochliran.com and leave your details there if you wish to be updated and learn more about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Also, be sure to follow my podcast, The Human Founder, in any of your podcast apps. let's hit pause. Till next time. Thank you so much, Orna.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.